Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for this midday edition of Live from NYPL. My name is Shantae Burns-Simpson, and I am the Associate Director of School Support and Outreach for the New York Public Library. I'm here to welcome you to what I'm sure will be a fascinating discussion about a new book, Breaking Barriers, and the PTech model for reforming high school and college education. PTech schools reimagine the traditional paths toward education and career building. They enable students to earn both a high school diploma and a no-cost 2-year post-secondary degree in a STEM field. PTech started 10 years ago in a low-income Brooklyn neighborhood school, and now PTech operates in 240 schools across 12 states and 28 countries. PTech's founder and the author of Breaking Barriers, Stanley Litow, is with us today. Stan has had a remarkable career in technology and education. In addition to his work creating PTech and writing this book, he also currently serves as a professor and innovator in residence at Duke University, a trustee of the State University of New York, and is president emeritus of the IBM Foundation and vice president emeritus of IBM's Global Corporate Citizenship Program. He is the former deputy chancellor of schools for the city of New York, former executive director of the Educational Priorities Panel, and the former executive director of the New York City Urban Core, operated out of the mayor's office of the city of New York. He'll be joined by Arne Duncan and PTech's founding principal, Rashid Davis. Rashid, the founding principal of PTech, opened its first school in 2011 and has been working in education for 25 years. Before joining PTech, he worked in New York City schools and was the principal of Bronx Engineering and Technology Academy. He is a 2012 Kahn Fellow with Teachers College, Columbia University, the first recipient of Fordham University's Graduate School of Education Lifetime Achievement Award, and he wrote the afterword to Breaking Barriers. Arne Duncan is currently the managing partner at Emerson Collective and managing partner at Chicago Cred, which works to reduce gun violence in Chicago. Before that, he was the US Secretary of Education in the Obama administration between 2009 and 2015. And before that, Duncan served as a Chief Executive Officer of Chicago's public schools. So in a nutshell, if you want some real wisdom when it comes to education and technology, you could ask for a more experienced and committed group of speakers. And we're very fortunate that they took some time from their days to join us. Like PTech and all of today's speakers, the New York Public Library is committed to doing its part towards ensuring that all children receive every educational resource they possibly can. The Center for Educators in Schools, under Brian Bannon's leadership, will support student success and provide learning opportunities for educators to meet the learning goals of this school year. We're at a pivotal moment in the nation's history as schools are crucial institutions for grappling with the profound social changes we are witnessing. NYPL is in possession of immense resources that can help educators and students face our shared history and prepare for our future. Our new Center for Educators in Schools, a born digital initiative that also provides analog resources, a collaboration between professional educators and librarians, an initiative reaching across research and branch libraries, is poised to profoundly extend the NYPL's research and help realize the democratic potential of both libraries and schools. Teachers and students are working through the pandemic, but they want to do more than survive. They want to thrive. The NYPL Center for Educators in Schools will leverage the power of educators to connect millions of students to New York Public Library's rich collections, who will in turn use them to remake themselves and our world. Speaking of the library's core services, If you have an NYPL library card or live in New York State and want to apply for one now, you can borrow Stan's book for free. Or if you're able, you can buy it from the library shop. The proceeds will go to benefit the library. You can find the links to get the book in the chat and on the event page found at nypl.org/live. On to this conversation, which will start in a minute. If you'd like to ask Stan, Rashid, or Arne a question, they love to answer them. You can send your questions at any time using the chat, the Google form, or by emailing publicprograms@nypl.org. They'll get to as many as they can at the end. Okay, please welcome Rashid Davis, Arne Duncan, and Stanley Litow.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be joined by Arne Duncan and Rashid Davis, and we'll have an opportunity to talk to you about PTech and about this new book, Breaking Barriers, which I had an opportunity to co-author with Tina Kelly and just came out a couple of months ago. But what is it that is unique about PTech? It's unique because it is not a traditional high school grade 9 to 12. It is a combination of high school, community college, grade 9 to 14 integrated model. So there is an actual scope and sequence of courses, high school classes, college classes combined together. Students have an opportunity to take their college classes very often as early as grade 9, the summer between 9 and 10. Many students actually complete the 6-year program in less than 6 years, many in 4 years. But there are lots of ways that they get additional support to be able to complete this program. It's a strong academic program, but there's also a connection to the workplace. So it was initiated when I was at IBM, partnering with that initial school in Brooklyn that opened across the street from a public housing project in Crown Heights in Brooklyn. But every student got access to a mentor from the company to be able to provide the kind of support that very often a middle income or an upper income student would have and be able to provide that mentoring. They get paid internships. They get structured workplace visits where they have an opportunity to test out workplace skills in the workplace. And when they complete, they are first in line for jobs at the partnering company. In the first instance, it was IBM, but it has gone far beyond one company. So Thomson Reuters, Corning, Tesla, Global Foundries, companies all across the United States and now all across the world partnering with PTech schools. And we have lots of examples of innovative schools, as you'll hear from Arne. There are lots of an innovative school, but very often it just succeeds in that one school. Now there are over 260 actual PTech schools across 28 countries. Not a lot of examples of a program that started in a low-income neighborhood in Brooklyn that is now operating in Singapore, Japan, Ireland, Italy, Australia, all following the US model. Now this program, this PTech model, began for a couple of compelling reasons. Number one, the jobs that are growing and have high wages require a post-secondary degree. And yet large numbers of low-income students, especially students of color, are not able to complete a post-secondary degree and go into the workplace with only a high school diploma, and they earn 84% less than somebody who has a post-secondary degree. Now, as pointed out in this book, the support of PTech comes at the ground level with people like a principal like Rashid Davis, strong support from teachers, strong support from parents, strong supports from community-based organizations, but also strong support at the top. And one of the reasons I'm so pleased to have Arne Duncan with us is that in 2013, only 2 years after the school in Brooklyn first opened, the President of the United States featured it in his State of the Union address, shortly thereafter visited the school, and was kind enough to say, after visiting the school classrooms with Arne Duncan, was kind enough to say, this is an initiative that every student in America should have an opportunity to have. And that leadership from the president, from the then Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan, led to governors across the United States, heads of state outside the United States, wanting to adopt this model. So Arne, I'd like to ask you a little bit about how important it was to have the president putting his weight of his office behind this initiative and being able to stand up and say, this is something that ought to spread, and actually it did. How important is that leadership, Arne, in having this spread across the United States?
Well, what the president and I tried to do, we were just the cheerleaders. You guys did all the hard work. So you guys had the vision. You had an extraordinary principal there with Principal Davis. So you guys did everything hard. We did everything easy. But when you see, I didn't learn anything. I've never learned anything sitting behind a desk in an office building. I got to go out and see schools and travel the country. And I saw okay schools. I saw some schools that break your heart. And I saw some schools that truly inspired me. And yours was one of them. It's funny. I visited hundreds and hundreds of schools. I remember that visit like yesterday. And I did go back. I told the president, this is something pretty special. We need to, he was visiting schools all the time. And he said, great, I'll come check it out. And so we never say anything we don't believe. If we didn't believe that, we wouldn't have said it. But where you have a chance to have kids accelerate their learning, we have a chance to have them be surrounded by mentors. We have a chance for them to get college credit in high school. We have a chance to bridge the divide between where folks might not know anyone who works for an IBM to having that sort of be part of their daily or weekly lives, where we can do things in a non-traditional manner and get fantastic results for kids. It's not just an opportunity, it's an obligation for us to try and talk about it and see it expand. And, there's no perfect model. There are things I'm sure you're improving on every day and trying to get better at. But those kinds of opportunities of academic acceleration, of job internships, of mentorships, of chances again to get college credits while in high school. I mean exactly today what the president said before. Every kid in America would be much better served if that was the norm rather than that being the exception.
That's great, Arne. And I think one of the things that's really interesting is that just a couple of months ago, President Macron of France said virtually the same thing. He was visiting a PTech school in France as they're spreading across the country. And he said, every student in France should have the opportunity to attend a PTech school. So this is spread around the world. Now, there was a lot of, I would say, resistance to what we used to call vocational education in the United States. A lot of people thought a vocational school was a less than kind of an education that was being pushed at low-income students or students of color. And a lot of people, when PTech first started, said, we don't want a vocational school for students who are low income. We want to give them all the opportunities. And yet now, 10 years later, after that first school opened, the students who complete their college completion rates are 400% higher than the national average. So they're not just taking college courses, they're getting an after a college degree. And when we look at the graduates of Rashid's school, we see Morsaleen Mozahid on his way to medical school. We see Shudan Brown on her way to getting her PhD. We see students who are getting their four-year degree from schools like Cornell and Georgetown. Oscar Tendella, who is more than 2 years behind in grade 8, when shows up in Rashid's school and completes the program in 3.5 years, gets a full scholarship to Cornell. So that resistance and thinking that vocational schools is offering you a low-wage job and no real opportunities is blown away with this model. Is this an opportunity, Arne, for us to really rethink vocational education, which we now call career and technical education, along this PTech model?
Well, I think the debate or the issue is a little more complicated than that. I think what many folks react to, and I would put myself in the same camp, is that you never want to track students. And what you see in other countries, Germany, other places, is they tell you at 13, you are college material or you are not. And there's a fork in the road. And the training they provide is fantastic. But I don't ever want us to be in a situation of telling a child you are college ready or you are not, or career ready. For me, it's always in education, it's always both and. It's not either or. Examples you just gave of students that may have started behind, not because they weren't intelligent, not because they didn't have work ethic, they just hadn't been challenged before and hadn't been motivated before, and you did that and bam, they took off. And I think the truth is today that all of us have to continue to learn until the day we die. Many of us are going to work and go to school at the same time. So these are all false. These are false debates. And what I want is for every child to have a range of fantastic options, a range of higher education options. If they want to go into the world of work, a range of world of work options. But all of us have to continue to learn and grow forever. So it's getting past some of those false dichotomies, yes. But it's sort of, I just want to address the elephant in the room, is that you never want to quote unquote track students. And let's be clear, that's often, boys or boys of color, or, you're not, you go be the mechanic. I got one of my friends that runs Loop Capital Management, a huge money management firm here in Chicago. He was told in high school he should be a TV repairman. And there's nothing against being a TV repairman. That's an honorable profession. But he had some different aspirations, some different goals. And so that's the challenge. But yes, to learn, to have options on both sides, to follow your heart, follow your passion. All of us are going to continue to learn and grow go to school the rest of our lives. And these are false dichotomies. And I think, again, the PTech model is a great example of what can be, not what used to exist.
Thank you, Archie. I'm going to ask you, Rashid, one of the things that people ask is, what's so different about this school? I mean, yes, students have an opportunity not just to take college courses, but to get a college degree. But with large numbers of students, your school has 100%, virtually 100% students of color, virtually all of them low income. And many of them, as we talked about, maybe close to 2/3 coming in behind in grade 8. And yet they have this trajectory of enormous amount of success. So people say, what is it? What's the secret sauce here that makes it so different? And one of the things we write about in the book is the culture in the building. And I know you care passionately about this, to believe that 100% of the students in the school are going to succeed and provide the supports so that they will succeed. So talk a little bit about that culture in the building that turns into success for so many students that others.
Did I freeze or? Okay.
I think you're good, Rashid. You go ahead. I think Stanley froze,
Okay,
so you got the question.
Thank you. So the secret sauce really are the people and the commitment to each other and the belief in public education. And so we tell each student and parent that we're going to meet you where you are and allow you to go at your pace. I've hired every teacher, every faculty and staff member since the beginning, and it really is having that conversation. I don't need a 2-hour interview. I really only need 5 minutes to be able to fill you out to see whether or not you believe in children. If you believe in meeting them where they are and really giving them the time and the respect that shows that as long as you continue to try, that we're going to make this happen. And so the secret sauce is really that transparency. It's difficult. We're honest with the difficulty. We're honest where you are. We want you to know if you are reading below grade level. We want to know if you're below grade level in math. But then we want to give you the tools and say, if you change your habits and behaviors, you can change your performance. And so that is still the same conversations that we have now, especially during the reality of COVID, when we know that learning loss has to be addressed. And so using technological tools and helping families and students and say, you may have to work longer than some other students based on where you are, but you still will have the same opportunities that they do.
Yeah, Rashid, and one of the things that you have in the building, this culture that every child will success, is supported by all of the teachers in the building. And there are a lot of school reforms and people think that it will not get that teacher buy-in and that teacher support. But I believe with 1,800 schools in New York City, you had like the second highest teacher attendance rate of any school in the city of New York. And one of the things making clear that teachers are supportive of this model is that the foreword to the book was written by Randy Weingarten, the head of the AFT. So talk a little bit about getting that teacher support in the building for all your students.
Yeah. Well, once again, it's great to be able to be the hiring manager for the talent. But it's also great because, I've been in education for 25 years and I was a delegate, union leader. And so I understand contract, I understand professionalism, I understand how to treat people. And I think that buy-in matters. Teachers, work long hours because they love what they do. But when you treat them with dignity and respect, it's a different relationship also, not that they have with each other, but also with the students who are in their classroom. And so that becomes incredibly important. Having you and Arne with this conversation is really a full circle moment because of the reality of my belief in how we use data. I was privileged before coming to PTech to work at Bronx Engineering Technology Academy. That was part of the New Visions support network. And Stan, from your work with New Visions. But what the leadership did at New Visions, we studied Chicago. We looked at the relationship between Chicago Public Schools and the Chicago Public University of New York. And that data, paying attention to the on-track readiness for graduation and looking at credit accumulation and looking at attendance, that was really great preparation for me before coming to PTech. So I really understood high school behaviors that we needed to really attack if we wanted to reform, and specifically in the 9th grade. I'll never forget looking at a chart it was called a leak in the faucet. And it said for every 100 students in Chicago, Black males specifically, only 2.5 of them would have earned a 4-year degree 6 years later. I still have that chart on my wall and in my files as a motivation to how, when I talk to teachers, we need to think of entry points of lessons different. So that way every student really believes and can see themselves in a day-to-day operation. So that way we can go from high school course taking to college ready, to college access, to industry participation and college completion.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rashid. And Arne, after the PTech school opened in New York, then Mayor Rahm Emanuel got elected mayor in Chicago and brought the program to Chicago with great success. The Sarah E. Good, one of the first schools with similar success rates on the south side of Chicago. And now we have state like Texas, where there are nearly 100 there are 18 PTech schools with a population of 9,000 students.
And you're freezing up, I'm sorry. Maybe cut off your video and just do the audio, see if that helps.
Texas definitely does have the most replications of PTech, as Stan was saying, now at 9,000 students, right?
You're on mute, Stan.
We have 9,000 PTech students in the city of Dallas. There's a PTech school embedded in every comprehensive high school in the city of Dallas, spreading with these results that were first experienced in Brooklyn across the state of Texas. And we see PTech schools in rural areas. We see PTech schools in southern states like Louisiana. So what will it take, Arne, really to fulfill President Obama's statement of this is an opportunity for all students? What will it take? Is it leadership at the state level? Is it federal leadership? What will it take to provide this opportunity, not for hundreds of schools, but to make it more systemic across the United States?
So a couple thoughts there. That's the right question. I always say in education, we're solving for all of our challenges. We are solving all of them someplace. What we don't do is scale, and you guys have scaled way more than most, but we still have a long way to go. So a couple thoughts. One is that Principal Davis, is just, focus on the data and figure out what's working, what's not. And so if I'm looking to scale, so if I'm looking to grow, I got to know the facts. I got to know the truth. And I always say the data doesn't tell the whole truth, but it doesn't lie either. So just staying real honest. I'm sure across your network of schools, you probably have some high flyers and some that aren't as good. And how are you challenging the status quo then? So just being real honest there. Secondly, I always say there's nothing about the name of a school or a program that changes lives. It's always relationships. So the name PTech has not helped any child do anything. It's great teachers, it's great principals. And so making sure that we have the right leadership, in all the schools, or, as many as we can, that's critically important. And then the final thing I'll say is, at the end of the day, I would say education should be the ultimate bipartisan issue. There's nothing left or right or Republican, Democrat about reducing dropout rates, about increasing graduation rates. And the fact that you've expanded New York and Chicago and also Texas and Louisiana, where the politics might be a little different at the moment, that's a great thing. Honestly, that's just music to my ears. I'm trying to figure out ways to help stitch our democracy back together and create more educational opportunity. There's maybe no better place to do that. So if we want to keep scaling, focusing on the data, being real honest on the successes and the failures, and being able to challenge things where it's not working, continue. There's nothing more important than great leadership in every building. And that great leadership will attract and retain great teachers. And absent that leadership, you'll just see turnover and churn and a perpetuation of mediocrity. And then, telling the story at every level, at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level. And you never know the interplay between those things, what's going to lead to the next breakthrough. But it almost breaks my heart a little bit, Stan, when you guys talk about what you've done. Again, better education opportunities, mentorship, higher education opportunities. It's basically like a triumph of common sense. There's nothing, the genius is putting it all together, but those individual pieces, it's not rocket science. Like, we know what works for kids. And the fact that we haven't scaled this, the fact that we haven't made it the norm, so shame on us. And so the replication has been fantastic, has been great, far superior to many, but there's a long way to go. And so I just think we should be, as hungry now or hungrier to continue to scale. And the final thing I'll say is that we all know today that, if you drop out of high school, you're basically condemned to poverty and social failure. There are no good jobs out there. And there was a time going back 20 or 30 years where here in Chicago, you could drop out and go work in the stockyards or steel mills and, get a good job and own a home and support your family. And now it's not just about education. It's about, are you going to be able to participate in our economy? Are you going to be able to participate in our democracy? Are you going to be locked out? And I truly worry about our democracy framed at the edges. Less, yes, around race and class, but it's really framed along educational opportunity. And that cuts through, that could be inner city urban, that could be in Appalachia. And so getting these opportunities to the kids and communities, again, inner city urban, remote, rural, Native American reservations. This isn't just about education. This is about transforming life chances. And so the stakes are extraordinarily high, never been higher than they are today.
No question about it. I mean, when PTech started, we were moving out of the recession. It was 2011. And the skills crisis is even more intense now as a result of COVID. What we've seen is large numbers of young people not going to college. We saw a big decline as a result of COVID. There was like a 30% decline in college enrollments for low-income students of color as a consequence of COVID. But in terms of spreading it, Rashid, one of the things that was important in the PTech model was to eliminate as many of the impediments to replication in the design. So number one is it wasn't spending a lot more money on the program. It was existing basically on the exact same amount of money that you would spend on any student. So it doesn't require huge amounts of excess capital. Number two, it's a regular public school. So this is not a special school. It doesn't have a special admissions requirement. One of the things I think you're passionate about is its open enrollment, which means this is an opportunity for any student, not an exam to get in, not looking at your grades. Any student could have this opportunity. And there's no, change in the regulation or legislation. So it operates as a regular public school, same amount of money. You get visited by people, from around the United States and around.
We've definitely hosted tremendous visitors.
Geography. And talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that.
I think it's important, Stan, as an educator, to always be immersed with organizations where you can professionally develop yourself and in turn give that to teachers and build that into the day. So built in our day is a culture where teachers can learn from each other. And that's the sacrosanct. I said, part of the design was we must have professional development daily. And so teachers do have common planning time. And so part of the reality is that you have to believe in education. You have to believe in preparing yourself from a leadership standpoint. I must talk to other leaders. And so organizations like the Kahn Fellowship, which gives me the opportunity to do the action research, that becomes incredibly important, which helps leaders to be able to lean on other people and be able to see people really who believe in beating the odds. And so that way you can create cultures that people aren't afraid to take risks. Teachers need to be able to take risks. Students need to be able to take risks, and not only from you don't only need physical safety, but you need safety in academics. You need safety to be able to freely express your thought. And I can't say enough about the importance of working collaboratively with the public and private sector, exposing teachers to externships themselves, working with unions. I have to work with the CSA. I have to work with the UFT. And so it's important in terms of, for me to be transparent with my shortcomings. I have to be vulnerable and say, these are skill sets that I still need to develop. And so I will never underestimate the power of belonging to a great network. And that's why I go back to New Visions. I go back to Kahn. When I look at the reality, Janice Jackson, who became CEO of public schools, and Misha Porter, who's now the New York City Department of Chancellor, are also Kahn Fellows. And so I can't say enough that educators have to believe in education. And when you do that, the students understand that you'll be growing for the rest of your life. And then you can walk that talk and they see it. They see my people who I hire going back to grad schools. So that way we can see that pipeline shift. We have more than 50% Black males on staff. And that's part of creating a pipeline. Once again, Arne Duncan went to my alma mater, Morehouse, with Spike Lee in 2011 and talked about the need for having more Black men in education. So there really are great intersections of research. Action research is really important. If you really believe in equity, you must live it, you must lead it. And so you can't just leave it to other people. It's incredibly important to be transparent with the culture and to be transparent about the failures or not necessarily failures, but the struggles, and that some things will take longer to change than others. But as long as we stick at it, we can have success over time.
And one of the special things about PTech is this actual a college degree as part of your high school experience. It's not just college courses, it is an actual college degree. And one of the things that we know across the United States is that a large number of students who graduate high school wind up having to take remedial courses. Those are non-credit bearing courses. Such a large percentage are not college ready. And the remedial courses that they're taking wind up taking a lot of money, a lot of time. It's billions of dollars, and they wind up lagging behind and not completing college. So Arne, not one PTech student has taken a remedial course. They're all not just college ready, but they're taking college courses, they're completing their degrees. That's a dollar savings when we think about investing in programs like PTech. You've got a return on your investment. Students who graduate with a college degree earn 84% more. They pay more in taxes. You save the remedial costs. You know that remediation is a real problem here, and PTech addresses that. So talk a little bit about the return on investment idea so that when you explain it to governors around the United States, you explain that by beginning a PTech program, you actually get a return on your investment, right?
Not only that, but you, not to be funny here, but you would have saved me the whole Common Core fight. The whole point of Common Core was literally, that was the only idea, was to say that if you graduated from high school, you would not have to take remedial classes going to college. And just to put the numbers on it, maybe a year or two out of date, but college is too expensive. We know that. We got to continue to reduce costs. But we spend $7 to $9 billion with a B, $7 to $9 billion each year for high school graduates to go to college, to pay college tuition, college loans. Parents are paying for non-credit bearing classes. Let's be clear, remedial means you are not moving towards your college degree. And so you're spending that money, and the dropout rates are much, much higher. So actually, I did not know that stat that you just said, Stanley. It's my first time hearing it. That's a stunning statistic. And so if you talk about scaling, no one wins, no one benefits when you have students across the country. In some communities, it's 60, 70, even 80% of high school graduates are going to college and taking remedial classes because they're not ready. And so, yes, the economic case, the ROI, that's a staggering number. I also want to be clear, because when people think about this, they often think, well, that's a great plan for the students that are ahead or accelerated. I actually think the college classes, early college, what you guys are doing, dual enrollment, actually that's a great dropout prevention strategy. And I can't tell you how many kids I've worked with on South and West Sides who are as smart, as talented as anyone, but they just thought college was for somebody else. College was just for rich folks. It wasn't for people who look like them and from their communities. And just to get that exposure and to take those classes and feel I can be successful, it's not the academic learning is important, but way more important is breaking these psychological barriers and saying, I belong in this world, I can be successful. And for your students to be not just taking those classes, you said getting those diplomas, those associate's degrees, whatever it might be, that's a life-changing opportunity. So again, the wins on multiple levels. Yes, the ROI, the financial investment, but having young people who may well be the first generation going to college who really thought, this isn't for people like me. It's not for people from my block, from my neighborhood. To have that done, I'm literally seeing for young people, the light switch goes on, and all of a sudden, I belong. I can compete. I should be here, and that's a big deal.
Yeah.
And Stan, I think that what Arne says goes back to the secret sauce and the parents and students who really still do believe in public education. And that is why they are making the sacrifices to be able to show that there is a value add to have students earn their STEM degree, because all of our degrees are STEM. And when a student can earn a degree in grade 12 or grade 13, or even on time grade 14, that's an added additional benefit to taxpayers, because you're talking about, STEM, which is still a national shortage for the realities of what we are talking about when all of our degrees are computer sciences.
Yeah, and we look at one of the PTech schools in Newburgh, New York. That school, small school, but they accounted for 2/3 of the graduates at the State University of New York, Orange in cybersecurity. 2/3 of the graduates in cybersecurity coming from this one little tiny PTech school in the city of Newburgh, a city that had the highest crime and drug rates in the state of New York. So it wasn't, just a STEM degree, but it was a STEM degree in a real high opportunity area like cybersecurity. And seeing many of those students going on and getting their bachelor's degrees and earning high wages, and not just having a job, but having a real career. Let me remind people, you can post your question in the chat area, because we've got about 5 more minutes before we're going to go to questions from people who have questions. I'd like to follow up one more thing, Rashid, with you about the diversity issue, because this is something that is really critically important. In many places across the United States, we're seeing schools that are more segregated than ever before. And providing this opportunity for students of color, they come into your school, they come into schools around the country with this assumption that they can't succeed, and yet they do. And what about that has to do with day one, you tell them they're in college, and day one, you tell them that they have a career opportunity? How motivating is that for the students?
You know, at this particular age, you know, you have to be 3 to 5 steps ahead, because a teenager can see, you know, fakeness in a nanosecond. And so day one, I have to be transparent. My staff has to be transparent in building the relationship. How I greet you outside of the school matters. The fact that I have a presence outside of the school matters. The fact that when you walk around the hallways, we're majority Black males, but you also see a majority Black male staff. So when people, you know, I love it when Jenny said you can't be what you can't see. Well, we've removed that as a barrier, because we make sure that you can definitely see what we want you to be. And that becomes incredibly important. You know, the transparency matters, image matters. The college ready career posters that we have on the wall, once students are college and career ready, reinforces what's possible. So when you see yourselves or you see your peers up on the wall, you say, okay, I need to be able to change my habits and behavior so that way I can be on the wall. I think it's incredibly important that we don't underestimate the power of motivation, that we don't underestimate the power of the self-image in that motivation. And so people believe in the bigger picture because first and foremost, we believe in humanity. I think that becomes incredibly important. There are definitely some challenges more than others, but I think the humanness, the humanity is really the great piece for us, because students see that and they're willing to take a chance with some caring adult in the building.
You know, Arne, when this program began, a lot of people thought, well, you know, it was great that IBM stepped up and developed this program. They've hired large numbers of graduates from PTech schools across the country, virtually all of them students of color, into jobs, but they didn't think other companies would come on board. And yet now there are 600 companies that are partners with PTech schools. We had an example last year, Thomson Reuters hiring virtually the same number as PTech. In one school in Dallas, they had 28 students that had paid internships before they got their degree, and they made a job offer to 23 of the 28 students. So how significant and how important is it that the private sector, with all these great opportunities, are partnering and winding up with a pathway to get access to students of color and students who many people thought wouldn't succeed, but moving into these high wage careers?
There's two thoughts. First, is to echo what Rashid said, that there has to be pathways, and students have to understand what it's like to be in an office building and what's expected there, and what does that feel like, and can you be comfortable there? And if that's not your lived experience, that's a real challenge. And so those internships, those mentoring opportunities, those career days, career shadowing, you can't overstate how important that is when that's a different world. And that can be very scary, very intimidating, and we have to break those barriers. I think the fact that you led and IBM led was so hugely important, and thrilled that 600 others stepped up. But I want to challenge the audience here, is that I desperately wish every business did something with a school, and maybe not everyone can, you know, have the reach or power of an IBM, but just having an investment, but, you know, not just at the high schools, but particularly at the high schools, and bringing students in, having them see the careers, having them talk to professionals, being part of that. That can only come from the business community. And you understand this world much better than I do, Stan, but so many businesses are international now. They can get talent from anywhere. So if the talent's not here, they'll go get it from India, they'll get it from China, they'll get it from Singapore, they'll get it from somewhere. But I just need these companies in the US to be invested in our US public schools, in our US public school students. And to your point, it's not guaranteeing a job, but it's opening the door and creating a priority, an opportunity to have them do that. And if every business, I think I don't want to speak for you, but I think it was probably a combination of, yes, altruism, but also self-interest. You need more talent at IBM. You need more diversity at IBM. And I think that's the perfect, confluence. That's a win-win when it's altruism and self-interest working together. I'm all for that. I had no problem with that. And I just would, I love that so many other folks have stepped up, but frankly, I know so many haven't stepped up and aren't invested in the success of our nation's, 20,000 public high schools. And if we had more folks in that game, again, our country would be in a much better place, and our families and communities would be much more solid and stable than they are today.
Oh, absolutely. And we're getting to the point where, companies are making pledges about hiring more people who are diverse and hiring more young people from these backgrounds. But it's not going to work unless you get involved earlier on and create the pipeline of young people who can take these jobs, right?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. The funding for the nonprofit I run now comes from Silicon Valley, so I'm getting to know that world a little bit. It's a different world, and the number of folks out there who tell me, we want to hire, we just can't find the talent. And I'm a little, or maybe a lot, impatient with that statement, because to your point, you can't. If you want that talent, one, is there, but two, if you really want it, you create that pipeline, and that's exactly what you guys have done. And so, just to sort of sit back and say, bring me the masses. There's an arrogance there, or a disconnect from reality, that if you truly want more men, more women, more folks of color, well, then damn it, you got to create those opportunities, and you got to do that early on. And that's what you guys, again, your vision was just so critical, Sam. I'm so glad others have followed your lead. But absent your leadership, we wouldn't be sitting here today. So it means more to me than you can know.
Thank you so much, Arne. We have a question, Rashid. I think this one I'm going to turn over to you. What are some of the practices that need to be implemented at the elementary school level to better prepare students for programs like PTech? Rashid?
Yes, I think the elementary school teachers need to be sitting side by side as often as possible in districts with the high school, because once again, we are in early college and early industry. And so many of the same strategies that we use are the same strategies that they use, because we still have to build confidence in younger students to be able to take on what they have seen as older roles when it comes to work and college. And so there are many similar strategies, but reading on grade level is incredibly important. Doing math on grade level is incredibly important. By 8th grade, algebra should be completed. Whatever you can do to have those conversations with your high schools and your district to say, what can we start early to make sure that they can come to you better prepared is important. So alignment is incredibly important, to have the elementary, middle school, and high school continuously talk, so that way we can see alignment. That it's great that I have a college liaison and an industry liaison actually in the building, so that way the day-to-day operations always include high school, college, and industry, and not just one pillar, but all three. And so if you want to really expose in elementary, you got to be sitting side by side by the older students and teachers.
Great. And Arne, this question I'll turn over to you. What are your thoughts on STEM versus STEAM? STEM versus STEAM, and just technology and math, or arts too? What are your thoughts about that, Arne?
I'll take STEAM all day long, but let me be clear. For me, it's always about quality. So there's nothing about STEM, there's nothing about STEAM, there's nothing about PTech, there's nothing about any name that tells me anything about quality. So the more high quality, we can start with the STEAM list. I can go to foreign languages, I can go to coding, I can go to financial literacy. There's so much more that we can add to what young people need to be successful today. But for me, it's always got to be the highest quality. And if we can do all that, great. If we need to narrow the focus a little bit more to get the quality. But the laundry list, the acronyms, we got more alphabet acronyms in education than anywhere. Just show me the quality, and I'm happy with anything.
Yeah, that's great.
I think that's also like college or careers. It's both. Yeah. So because art is embedded in everything. And so it's very important. Many people may think because they don't see art that art doesn't exist, but it's very important also. We're talking about the whole child. So extracurricular activities matter, sports matter, music matter. And so all those things we still have to build time for students to have access to, because it's a part of adolescent development.
It's one of the things, Rashid, I think that's important about how the classes get taught at a school like PTech in Brooklyn. In the math class that President Obama and Arne visited back in 2013, the algebra class was taught by a teacher who was explaining how do you use algebra to solve a problem, right? And the students were working in teams to create a business plan to go in competition with Nike to sell a new brand of sneakers. So they were learning to problem solve, they were learning to write, they were learning to present. So each class, whether it was a math class, an English class, a history class, were all using the opportunity to teach that strong academic curriculum, but to utilize all of those other tools. I remember taking the president of Johns Hopkins into that math class, and he walked out into the hallway and said, "I've never seen a math class like that. That was amazing." The kids were so engaged and involved. Talk about how you get the teachers to be able to address all of those things in all of the classes. So STEM is not unique. It's part of everything, right?
Mhm. I think, someone has a question about the importance of school libraries. And I think I can answer it using the fact that, you have to trust teachers with their craft, but you have to also give them the professional development to continue to learn their craft. And so, I'm going to use your example of math, for example, so algebra, geometry, algebra 2 trig, or algebra 2 trig, then geometry, that has been many conversations across the country about how to teach math. Well, my teachers came up with a course and called it GeoGebra, because they fuse geometry and algebra. And so it's really about looking at state standards, looking at skills, looking at online tools, sharing data. We use an online curriculum called Atlas at the beginning, and we were able to share, curriculum with teachers across the country. And so best practices have to be shared. Libraries are incredibly important. And so you think of how do you teach from a thematic reality? Sometimes people only teach linear, but you may have to teach thematic. So that way you can align social studies with math. You can align science with math and social studies. You can have a great literature piece that ties in everything. So as much alignment as you can possibly do within your curriculum, and make sure that you can embed the reading and even arts and entertainment within that becomes incredibly important.
Yeah, we have a question about including adults as well. And I think one of the things that's critical about these PTech schools across the United States and globally is you have, so many adults who are involved in this program. Last year, IBM committed to 1,000 paid internships. Those are all people who are in the workplace, who are spending their time mentoring and advising students, and also, involving them in internships. So people have an opportunity. The students have an opportunity to interact with adults and really understand why these skills that are being stressed in the schools are important to every aspect of life. So Arne, many examples where people are doing mentoring and paid internships, but there aren't a lot support an integrated program where it leads not just to a job, but to a career.
Yeah, sorry, you froze there for a minute, but try and answer. I think the question was that the short answer is we cannot have enough adults engaged in our kids' lives, and whether it's the direct, internships we talked about, the job shadowing, the job opportunities, whether it's their own skill or passion, and maybe it's basketball, and maybe it's sewing, maybe it's debate, maybe it's academic decathlon, maybe it's chess. Rashid talked about the extracurriculars; those are critically important. Students will feel your passion, and we just want every kid to find their genius. Every kid has a different genius, a different interest, just like us in this call. So it's not about this is your path, this only path, but here are the 6, 8, 10 different options, and find your path and what's going to motivate you to come to school every day. So having those adults involved, on the academic side, on the job shadowing side, I would add on the social emotional side, just being a big brother or someone who, students are dealing with so much, stress and trauma now. And I wouldn't mind, this would be a dream if imagine if you had 2 or 3 adults playing different roles, just an extended family for every young person. That's the village right there. That would be fantastic. And the final thing I would add is just to think about not just the adults who can help, but the parents of your students? And are there ways to think about having those parents go back to school and retrain and retool, or get their associate's degree or whatever? And obviously what we're always trying to do is not just help kids in school, but trying to stabilize and strengthen families. And all of our kids go home to their families every day. So whatever we can do to engage their extended families, as well as building an extended family around them, it's all fantastic. It's all fantastic stuff.
That's such a good point, Arne, because and one of the stories that we told in the book, this young man, Oscar Tendilla, Oscar, again, went to PTech, was behind in grade 8, graduates get a full scholarship to Cornell with his associate's degree in hand. And the day that he graduated was the day that his mom got her GED. They both got that degree on the same
And that has been a
family
conversation, that I've had of wanting to do an adult PTech. So to make sure that we can offer the same type of degree pathway for adults. And so those conversations have been ongoing. So that way we can definitely have a pathway for many parents who also want to return to school to complete their post-secondary education.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I think we're just our conclusion. So I can't thank the both of you enough. Rashid, who did the afterword to this book, Breaking Barriers, I think very important. And Arne Duncan, who provided a quote on the back of the book to talk about the significance of PTech. It required the leadership of people at the school level, people like Rashid. It required leadership at the Secretary of Education level. Arne, I can't tell you how many governors who initiated PTech schools said they did so because they heard about it from you. That was the case in Rhode Island. That was the case in Connecticut. That was the case in Colorado, because the Secretary of Education asked what they ought to think about doing. You explained that PTech was an opportunity and model that they ought to consider. So now where we are at this point is to this initial school on Albany Avenue in Brooklyn, all around the world. We have them in rural areas, we have them in urban areas, we have them in all kinds of districts, and they're providing an opportunity for all students, not just kids from one zip code. And one of the things that we write about in the book was it was important to get all stakeholders on board. Arne talked a little bit earlier about things like Common Core, which became very divisive education issues that people at one point were everybody on the same page, and then all of a sudden people were very divided about the importance of it. And PTech really has united people. So it has the support of the teachers union, the principals union, red states, blue state, urban areas, rural areas, providing this opportunity. So do we really want this opportunity provided for all students? Do we want an economic future of real significance for all students? And we could provide it by keeping faith with what President Obama said when he initially visited the school, going into the classroom, meeting with the students. One of the students who introduced President Obama on his visit to PTech, Radcliffe Sadler, got his associate's degree. He got his bachelor's degree. He got a high-paying job at IBM. He's now been promoted and is now moved to Austin, Texas. And I had an opportunity to talk to him recently, and he'll never forget the visit that the president in that school. And it was a couple of days before people couldn't believe that he was actually going to visit the school, and he did. And now we have heads of state like President Macron and presidents of countries around the world, all committed to the same notion. So we have an opportunity. I would love to have people read Breaking Barriers, but even more important than reading a book, put your energy and creativity behind insisting that this is an opportunity that ought to be provided to all students. So let me thank Secretary Duncan. Let me thank founding principal Rashid Davis. A great opportunity to talk to you both, and thank you for your strong support.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your leadership.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. For more information and to register for upcoming programs, visit nypl.org/live.